Hey guys, this week on Placemakers, my dad is joined by Peter Vanden Kieboom from Workshop Architects, John Taylor from ACUI, and Rob Wynkoop from Purdue University to talk all about the future of the student union. They talked all about design, changing the culture on campus, and things every union professional should be planning for. It's a great show. Enjoy!
Will the traditional college campus even be relevant in the future? Today, it seems that everything in higher education is in question. Now, more than ever, it's important for us to have those tough conversations about what the future holds. Join me as I talk to the placemakers, those professionals who are in the business of making college campuses places where people want to be. Each week, we'll explore the future of the college campus in a very uncertain world. From the Collective Good podcast, this is the Placemakers series by MSCU, and I'm your host, TJ Logan. All right, for those of you that are dropping in on us live, welcome to my favorite time of the week. It is the time that I get to hang out with my friends who are way cooler and way smarter than your friends and talk about the future of higher education. Today, our placemakers are Peter, Rob, and John, who are going to join us, and we're talking about the future of the college union today. Thanks for jumping in on us, and thanks for continuing the conversation. Guys, I want to jump right in, and I want to talk about this notion that I feel like the dialogue took a turn this week. You know, last week when we were on Placemakers, we talked about the fact that it felt like people were really talking about how to survive this thing and return to some sort of normal. And now the dialogue, at least in everything that I'm reading, has turned, and everybody's acknowledging, ooh, there might not be a new normal, at least not in the short term. And so knowing that we may not return to a new normal, we may return to something that's very, very, very different. I want to turn it over to you guys and whoever wants to talk. What does that mean? What does new normal look like from a college union perspective coming into fall, if we're even open in the fall? What are the things we ought to be thinking about?
I think that I initially
cheers,
bud. Cheers. I think initially, in my mind at least, I think all of our thinking is evolving quickly. But even a couple of weeks ago, it was kind of this notion that there's a switch and it goes back to normal or it doesn't. Right. And now everyone is really thinking about the thickening of that line between then and now in the future. And what are the kind of shorter term implications? And then what are the longer term implications? Could it return to normal? Is it going to be a new normal? How is what's happening now going to affect the way that we go forward? Can that be a very positive thing? I think is the other thing that we're thinking about.
And I love that visual of a thickening of the line, because that's how I see it, right? Is that, you know, we thought we were just going to turn and we'll be normal, but now it feels like there's going to be something in between, whatever that is. Rob?
I mean, here we are talking about a building on almost every college campus that is built for gathering, for students to get together, whether it's to study together, whether it's to get a quick nap between classes. This is a place where the community as well comes to gather, and now you've got this new normal, whatever it happens to be, and how do you do gathering differently? How do you get together differently in a space that's meant to get together?
Well, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, I think that what we are currently living has been a test run, right? And so we're all doing Zoom and kind of sick of it, and our students are doing that in their lectures and kind of sick of it. But if we're going to continue this, we have to think of better ways that we're going to deliver for student success. There's the financial impact and all of that I know that people in unions are worried about, but it really comes down to students and how we're supporting them. And so we have done okay with that virtually on this test run. What is it as this line thickens that we can do better? So are we managing events long distance in a better way? Are we helping our students and their student organizations to still have the leadership development that they need? So I think that's sort of what are the tools and the ways that we do that is sort of, if it's going to be extended, that we have to think through.
So let's stick with that for a second. One of the things that I think is the biggest challenge, particularly in a union, again, we have one of these on every campus in America virtually, these buildings that are intended to bring people together. What are the ways, because a lot of folks, and Peter knows this better than anybody, have buildings that were not built for even a pre-COVID 2020 world. And now we're going to be in a post-COVID 2020 world with all of the social distancing happening. How do we deal with some of the wayfaring issues and the amenities issues and the gathering space issues, the ballrooms, if I'm a union person and I've got a building on my hands that's meant to bring big groups of people together, what are the ways that I navigate that right now? Like what practically can I do?
I think for me, we were talking earlier about the need to really work now as places like Purdue contemplate opening up, is to think about the policies and the culture that we want to create. So, good sanitation practices, how you behave. We've all gone to the grocery store and seen people not social distancing. How do we kind of get everyone to work together toward that and really establish a new culture for those spaces? I know we're facing it at our workplace as we think about going back. The other thing, I think furniture in the short term is going to be a key. So we've all seen the press briefings with the reporters, 2 spaces in between. I don't think, the ballroom in the union is the place that we think, how do you do conferences? How do you have meetings?
Right.
And I think, again, that there's a medium-term solution where we might need to using technology, link some of those spaces together to keep people a little bit spread apart. But that, maybe that's not the final solution as we come back to a little bit more of a normal condition.
Well, I think the other thing, though, that we want to think about is just behavior, human behavior, right?
Yeah.
And that social distancing actually, and we want to implement it and do it well, but we don't want to throw out the important engagement aspects that we provide. So for example, people from all over the world come to our campuses, and there's different cultures, different backgrounds. And in the college union, in my opinion, more than any place else, we want that to be a welcoming and inclusive space on campus. And so if we're not thoughtful with how we do social distancing, we can kind of throw a wrench into our efforts to create inclusive space. Encourage behavior that maybe is culturally distancing rather than inquiring, engaging. So when we think about amenities, like think about any retailer, but just the information desk. So we train our staff so that 15 feet away, we're making eye contact. 5 feet away, we are engaging in conversation. So when we put social distancing in, we just want to think through, how are we still doing that, both in a human, natural way, cultural sensitive, while still being safe. And
I love this idea of creating a culture. When Peter mentioned that earlier, it what immediately sprung to mind for me was sustainability. You can put as many receptacles as you want in places. You can put as much physical infrastructure as you want. But if you don't create a culture of sustainability for people to really care about it, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. And one of the things that we talk about, to that point, it's a great point, is there's a certain amount of personal responsibility that goes along with all of this. To your point, we can put all the receptacles out there. We can put hand sanitizer everywhere. But if we don't communicate that there's a certain aspect of, you've got to wash your hands on a regular basis. We don't have the cleaning staff to clean a desk or to clean a chair in the union after someone gets up. So you've got to take some responsibility for yourself and respect those that come after you, and just help. Everyone does their part.
As we're entering into the Purdue project, we're at a unique phase that this happened when we're right in the middle of design.
Right.
So as we think through things, I think this is going to force an evaluation of every interaction as students work with the building as interface, to rethink how things are happening operationally. You see it at the grocery store, you see it at restaurants, how people handle apps. You order on your phone now, and you get there, you never have to touch anything. We were never that hypersensitive to all the things that we interact with. Things like doors, hand washing. How do we design the space to encourage more frequent hand washing? And this isn't something that's a radical change from the way that things were, but it's just good, smart health practice that we can kind of suggest that behavior and encourage that behavior through design.
It's funny because a word that stuck with me that you had used earlier was this notion of history of design and the history or the influence of disease and health and wellness on the history of design, and that this may be a moment in time that health and disease will have an influence on design. And I thought that was such an interesting thing to think about. And one of the things you said was you made the comment that, this could quickly reverse some of the trends that we've seen. And so, what are those trends? What are the things that are going to be reversed And are you scared at all that some things get reversed too far? The pendulum swings back way too far.
I'm kind of excited because a lot of the things in architects are talking a lot about this, but tuberculosis, the sanatoriums with their light colors and their air, their natural light, those led to healing of those. People went to California specifically to heal from TB, and that kind of drove a lot of that architectural language that's out there. So as I look at that in this context of student unions, I'm thinking about over and over about wellness and the wellness initiatives that we're seeing as a new focus on so many campuses to deal with rising, anxiety, depression among students. And ultimately that has a financial impact on their persistence and ability to graduate, even more so now. And I think for me, I'm most excited about this kind of psychology of spaces and that wellness piece. When you go into a space and there's no windows and there's no doors, you don't want to be there. You don't feel safe. There's something subconscious going on. So the degree to which we can make those spaces more warm, comfortable, in really subtle ways will encourage students to feel safe there. So natural light, windows that open, views of the outside and landscape, which is the new safe space, right? To be outside, you feel sort of a breath of fresh air, like, okay, now I'm good. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I love that. I think people being able to see healthy and see outside. The thing that has been a trend, kind of trending up, that I think people have resisted is the sort of open office floor space.
Yeah.
And we talked about that a little bit, but this could be the end of that. That it's been resisted enough, and maybe COVID has finally put it over.
The end of the open office concept, right?
Everyone's saying in workplace, in the architectural community, that's going to be a big impact. But
right.
I still think that there's value in those collaborations. We're just going to have to, again, I'm always a little bit resistant to this either or, black and white, right? At Michigan, for example, we've got an open collaborative space, but we've also got breakout meeting rooms and other ways that the space can divide. So there's, I'd hate to go back to hotels like we've seen at so many campuses where students are completely isolated from each other.
Right. Well, and what are the implications of that? Because it seems as though every other union on the planet has, for the last 20 years, had that model in place whereby student orgs particularly, or student activities or student groups, are in this village style setting or this sort of farm style setting where they're all in one big space. And so are we well equipped as a field from a facilities perspective, a space perspective, a financial perspective, to be able to address the needs of those groups without that as being the solution? Because that's a pretty economical solution too, is that we could just dump a whole bunch of people into one big open space. Well, now we can't do that. So how are we going to address, from a student activities perspective, this idea that we've used that concept for 20 plus some odd years?
I think there's still, I'm thinking of our office, which is pretty open and collaborative. We have flexible furniture. It's going to lend itself very well, I think, to arranging the furniture with a little bit more distance between things.
Yeah.
So that I'd rather be in that scenario than baked in offices where we all kind of retreat to our own little hamlets. And again, the policy, the culture is going to have to have a bunch of rules that we're developing as we speak about how we're going to come back into that engagement. But for me, the value in working with my teammates is there's so many things that happen just subtly, little, when we're presenting to clients at an interview, that, the body language kind of changes. You don't get that if you're separated. There's so much that happens in person. So I heard an architect speak recently talking about the metaphor of the mermaid, of a symbol that can move easily from the water to the land, and the metaphor of that between working digitally and working in place. And I see the way that we work is very fluid in our ability to go online like this and then go into physical meetings. If I see a change coming forward, I think that this has all shifted us more into that digital realm, but that there's still going to be a place for in-person attachment to place in institutions, which has effects on alumni donations and everything else. Right?
A ton of, and that's a comment Jim from SCB made when he was talking about housing. He talked about flexibility being the name of the game, and this notion of virtual spaces complementing face-to-face spaces. Not everything has to happen face-to-face, but there's still some value. And one of the things that he sort of hypothesized at the time was that face-to-face will happen in small groups, and that the big group interactions will happen more virtually. And so we'll have small pockets of people in places, whether it be in a student center, whatever it is, maybe doing some esports with a much larger population that's around, whether it be on campus or off campus.
Right.
Yeah, I think the synergy in the smaller groups, and in a face-to-face is so much different. I'm kind of old school, like the newsprint and a marker and doing that. The Zoom call where you're sort of guessing who's going to talk next makes it harder to brainstorm, So small things that make a difference.
Yeah, let me use I had a call or a Zoom with probably several of my colleagues last week, and one of the individuals who I know pretty well is an introvert, and that person said, I thought that this whole COVID quarantine was going to be the best thing that ever happened to me because I would never have to see anybody again. On that call, I said, but I'm telling you what, I can't take this anymore. I cannot wait to see you guys in face to face again. I won't say hi to you because I'm a total introvert. Really glad to see you. And I hear what you guys are saying, but I just think that we're made to be together, and people cannot wait to get back together because they're tired of this. Yeah, it's effective and we get work done, but you hit a wall at 3:30 every afternoon because you've been on calls or WebEx calls all day. And so I don't know what it's going to look like, but I think people can't wait to get together in small groups and medium groups and large. And
I think the other part of that is students learn differently when they're together. It's that experiential learning piece. And so there's lots that we learn in the classroom. We don't want to take away from that, but there's that extra piece, whether it's in your student organization or in a job in the union. It's that experiential piece where you're taking from the classroom and you're putting into place the leadership skills or whatever it is. It's really unique.
And that's one of my big fears is if the pendulum swings completely the other way, the things that we value so much about bringing people together and what it means for the ecosystem of an institution, the things students learn, the attachments that they make emotionally to the institution, and how they develop into alumni that care about that place that they came from, those are all tied together. And we can't lose that because that's what makes college campuses so special, right? That's what makes us all placemakers, because we believe in this thing where people come to these places and they engage on an emotional level. And that's what I wonder is, are there things that we're going to learn as this line thickens, as we think about short-term action? Do you think there's some opportunities that come out of this, some things we can hold on to that maybe down the line, we could have stopped doing that a while ago, and this gave us the opportunity to turn that corner?
I think so. I think, when there's a crisis, it creates innovation, right? And so if we look at it just from in the retail area, I'll look at retail and programming in retail. So maybe this is the tipping point for digital books, finally, that we've been waiting to happen, right? Maybe it's we have a handful of campuses that are using food delivery robots. I've seen it. It's kind of going around. It's kind of cool. That could really take off. I think of programming too. It's a little harder for me, but maybe this is how campuses can pool their money together to actually get big name Macs, which they haven't been able to do for many, many years virtually. So over the summer, I was traveling, and I love Bruce Springsteen. I've never seen him live. I can't believe it.
Born to run.
Yeah, and so I'm in a hotel room, and I'm not the type of person that really watches concerts online or on screen at all. But Netflix was doing a Bruce Springsteen thing where he was in, I think, his Broadway show. And I watched it and I was like, okay, I could do this. It's kind of cool. So I could see there being a mix,
And I think we're learning that about live events. I think there's something to live virtual events and the accessibility of it that might be a worthwhile lesson learned here. I don't disagree with you at all, John. What about the financial implications? And I'm looking at you specifically, Rob. We mentioned retail, and there is a lot of our unions are auxiliary operations. A lot of them rely on their retail partners to be a revenue generating or a revenue generating entity at the institution. Does that shift at all because of this? Is it a short-term shift, a long-term shift? Does the context of the union change in the entire campus? What does this mean for us from a financial perspective?
Man, I hope it's a short-term shift. Because we have right now 10 or 11 retail operations in our union, and the union is empty. There's nobody in there. There's no one to come spend money. And so, as we talked about some of the technology it could drive, as folks do come back, there are faster and easier ways to order that some campuses have already taken advantage of with touchscreen and better use of things like Apple Pay. We need to seriously take a look at those things. That speed helps with getting people through the line, speeding it up, not as many people in the line at one time for food, particularly at lunchtime. Those are the kinds of things I think we really need to take a look at. Those are the things that come off the top of my head just thinking about it. So
yeah, I think there was kind of like meeting reservation systems next to meeting rooms. Everybody's sharing the same screen.
Right.
And I know now when I've just recently really discovered Grubhub and other apps for food delivery, makes it seamless. I know that I'm going to be safe, and I've been watching all of the retail venues around town and know that the ones who really have it figured out are making a lot more money than the ones who haven't. So again, the details of the interface, and I think it's going to be a shift to people using their phones.
Well, I also wonder, unions, rec centers, there have been some hubs on college campuses that here's where we put just tons of people all at the same time. And I wonder if down the road that starts to spread itself out a little bit, and that we start to use retail as some of those anchors more throughout the campus than in just these certain hubs to have huge groups of people, and rather have smaller groups sort of spread throughout. I wonder if that may be a trend that we find ourselves on from a planning perspective that makes the whole campus sort of more of a dispersed gathering space than all condensed down into one space.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think there's a definite possibility for that, because if you do the retail well and you provide the concepts and the options, not just food, but other things as well, that your student body's looking for, if they like what they see and they like what's offered, they'll go there. And you can change habits. You can change normal, standard operating procedures for students. If it's done well with the right types of concepts, I think there's some value to that.
And does that take, I suspect, on most campuses, a breaking down of silos? Because right now, I think the way that we function sometimes is a byproduct of the way that we're structured. So, unions will do things within the sphere of influence that they have, and they say, well, I can do this here because it's my space. And maybe we need to break down some silos so that now we can have a discussion more broadly as a big campus. Do you think this leads to some of that on a lot of campuses?
It absolutely does.
I would love to see that. I mean, we're working across kind of student life, but rec centers with little studios that have you can work in use media, work with one or two other people with a trainer. What if that was in the union? What if we stopped thinking about, no, this is the domain of the rec center, this is the domain of the student center? And I think that's really exciting. One other point on the sort of breaking down of the big mega space into a series of smaller places on campus is a lot of what big dense urban areas like New York are starting to think about. Smart, kind of different sort of development that's more localized. I think could be good as well. But in terms of the union plan, I personally like, when there's a series of choices rather than one big epic atrium. We had the year of the atrium at ACUI. If there's a sense of discovery to other multiple kind of spaces that give students a real choice, depending on their level of comfort, depending on what mood they're in or what kind of work they're working on that day. So this kind of diversity of space, I think, is a real positive kind of thing.
And we've said, I don't disagree. Students first, students first, students first. But John, I'd be remiss if I didn't go back to your comment, which was the union oftentimes is sort of the welcome center, the hub, the place where guests come, the place. It is really a multi-dimensional facility on a campus that becomes a home base for alumni, all kinds of things. Does that shift a little bit too? And if it shifts, is it just short term or is it long term as well? What are the impacts there?
Maybe it's my desire.
Okay to not know. but maybe, prognosticate. Yeah.
Right. Probably more my desire than reality could be, but I still see the union as the central meeting and gathering place. I don't see that changing. I think it'll be different. I do think, as far as silos go and other parts of campus, I think we've seen that. I think we've seen more of the dean having their coffee shop and that type of stuff. If there is density for the business to be successful, I think it will happen. And students don't care. Students don't care where they're getting their service, and we know that. But I do have a bias. There's no doubt about that. I see still the union being the destination for people coming for a lot of different reasons. I think it'll change over the course of time. I think food is probably going to stay. You know, there was a joke among union directors years ago when everything was leaving because of the internet. The Netflix came and took over video stores and all that. But the joke was, well, we don't think they're going to be able to eat a hamburger online. Like they still got to come and eat.
They still got to get the burger. Yeah.
And so if we have those different destination values places, they're going to come to the union. I think it could be spread out over campus, but there is a value to being where you can see other people on your campus, not just being in the B school all day, but actually seeing other parts of the campus.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interdisciplinary.
I couldn't agree. I mean, when folks talk about meeting on campus, and I've only been working on a college campus for 7 years, but the number one place to meet is the union, and people will continue to do that. To John's point, I mean that it is the central focal point, even on our campus, even today.
Yeah.
Not close.
But you know, we do have to change some of our practice potentially to make that fit in what, at least in the short term, is that line thickens, to Peter's point, to make that work. And I keep hearing over and over again that health, wellness, health from a medical perspective becomes an amenity that people are tracking very, very closely, because if they don't feel safe in that space, it doesn't matter how convenient it is. I think that's going to take precedence over a lot of other things in ways that it maybe hasn't in the past. Yeah. So I want to wrap up with a big question for you. And that's really, what about this notion of people back on their campuses right now? Like I said, it seems like the dialogue is turning a little bit, and people are thinking about, oh no, fall's right around the corner. If we open in fall, and Rob, you made the comment, like I'm thinking we're opening for fall and I got to execute this way. So if I'm on my campus thinking we're going to open the fall, I got to execute this way, what are the things that people on their campuses right now that need to plan ought to have in mind today?
How much time do you have?
You get 5 minutes.
Again, it's evolving, but I mean, I talked about it earlier. Are you going to, everything from the basics of, are you going to have plenty of sanitizer in those high traveled areas? How are you going to begin to clean your classrooms? How are you going to begin to clean the union on a regular basis? You can't have someone in there every hour doing a mist down. You've got to think about those kinds of ways to do it. Are you going to, when students come back to campus, are you going to do that in a way to where they roll in over several weeks, depending on, whatever that major happens to be? They need more access to campus early on because they have projects and things like that demand them to be on campus. So can you do that in a slow manner? Do you have antibody testing ready? So, who doesn't on your campus? And there's just a myriad of things, and you've got to try to condense that into a plan as soon as you possibly can to get to the point of, all right, we're ready to go. We think we're about as prepared as we can be come August. So that's
logistical stuff, and I agree with you 100%. I think everybody's scattering for that and going, how do I get this many masks? How do I get all that other fun stuff? What about that culture shift piece? What about getting to the place where you set a culture in place whereby people can still engage in a college campus in ways that are beneficial to the things we all believe in, but offer that amenity of safety and distance? How do you get that culture shift to happen?
I think some of the things that were mentioned earlier about behavior, certainly we can put the social distancing in place.
God, I wish I could control the behavior.
But the other part, and I think this is also making sure we're using our resources across campus, thinking what these students have gone through. They've been in isolation like the rest of us. Now they're coming to a campus. For freshmen, they don't even know what to experience.
They've never had a graduation.
Right. There's a lot of things, a lot of didn't happens. How do we help them to experience those? And how do we use our partners, for example, in the counseling center to help us think through, how does someone deal with this? And how can we in the college union help them do that? How do we, our role, I don't think has changed. It is still going to be a place where we are creating campus community. We're going to do it in a safe manner, but we want to provide our services and programs and support student success for their involvement and their engagement. And so we need partners to sort of think through, how do we do that in the best way possible to make this isolation mode be over, and now we're all about getting back together for community.
And I suspect a lot of it is how can we all be in this together? I think that when I've seen campuses do a good job with sustainability as the example, or amnesty programs as an example, it's always been under the auspices of, hey, we're all in this together. And if you engage in this culture, you're part of a much bigger whole, part of something bigger than yourself. And I think that's really some of the messaging we have to put forward to these students coming into the space.
Yeah, I think communicate, and it has to come from the top, right? And so and that's one of the things that we've done here at Purdue. President Daniels on a regular basis has provided videos that go out to all the students, they go to everybody, giving updates, and it starts now to prepare for the August-September timeframe. But it's hard to do. I mean, culture is hard to change.
Absolutely. Peter, your advice, order a bunch of new furniture? Is that what I'm hearing? Just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is going to have to be worked out in conversations between us and our clients, obviously. I think a lot of different institutions are going to have very different needs. If I know one thing, it's that every union I've worked on in the last 22 years has been a very different place with very different culture. So it's gonna take people sitting down at the table and really thinking through, what are the challenges? How does the orientation process work? How does admissions work? Like, when do we have all those students together? And at the door, are there student staff that are helping one-on-one to enculturate people to the new space?
Yeah. Thinking as one comprehensive university seems more important now than ever before, breaking down the silos and doing it.
Agreed.
Well, gentlemen, time flies when we're having fun. No podcast is good after 30 minutes. I want to thank each and every one of you for spending time with us this afternoon. As I always say, my friends are better and cooler and smarter than your friends, and I'm just lucky to spend some time with you. Next week, we're going to be talking about strategic planning, the money, and capital planning moving forward on college campuses. So that should be an awesome conversation in the wake of what we've learned today. Thank you all once again. Cheers to you, and have a great evening. Thanks.
Thanks.
If there is anything we are learning during this quarantine, it's that content is king. Whether you're a higher ed pro who wants to start a podcast or a private student housing company who wants to host a webinar or virtual event, you want to do it with high quality. You want to align your brand with high quality audio, video, and stream live events that your customers deserve. Do what I did. Turn to our friends at Duo Studios. These guys can do it all. From streaming esports to hosting live events and making podcasting simple enough even I can do it. Make Duo Studios your partner in producing high quality content. Visit them today for a consult at duostudios.org/placemakers. That's Duo Studios, duostudios.org/placemakers.